Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Golf and Politics. We have a special episode today, and we're coming to you, I'm from the Blaze Co-working Studio in Broken Arrow, a new partner of the show that our producer is working out of this co-working space, and we're thankful to have this studio. But we have two distinguished guests with us this morning. Jason Dunnington, a Democrat from Oklahoma City. He was elected to the Oklahoma House of Representatives in 2014. He served 6 years in the legislature. Jason now does specialized work in government affairs. He's the proud father of 2 teenage children, and he's a dangerous 8 handicap. Anthony Moore, he's a Republican from Clinton, Oklahoma, elected to the Oklahoma House in 2020, where he chairs the Higher Education Committee. Anthony juggles being a legislator while also maintaining a robust law practice. We need to get this done this morning so he can go to court, actually. Anthony is happily married to Rachel. They have 3 kids. And if you wondered how much Anthony loves golf, well, he named his son Karsten. So those that know anything about golf know that's a golf name. So gentlemen, thank you for taking the time again to do this podcast. To set the stage for our listeners, back in July, the 4 of us got together at Oak Tree National in Edmond, Oklahoma, and our goal was to do the first on-course podcast. But like everything that we've encountered in starting this podcast, it was more difficult than expected. Well, we got a lot of good footage, but it wasn't enough to put together a podcast, so we need to come back together, and we're going to play some clips for you of our time on the course and then discuss those clips for this podcast. So gentlemen, again, thanks for joining. Let's just start with, what were your thoughts of Oak Tree National as far as a golf course? Where do you rank it in your favorite courses?
Anthony, you've played it a bunch, so I'll let you start.
Well, I obviously have played not as many good golf courses as you and Rob, Matt, but I don't know how many Jason's played, but
well, nobody's played as many good golf courses as Rob, except maybe Tiger Woods.
Right.
I don't even think Tiger has. He's played more good rounds.
So when I look at Oklahoma, I've got it. It's firmly top 3. People can argue. I think everyone pretty much has Southern Hills number 1, and then people argue about 2A and 2B being Karsten Creek and Stillwater. Before the remodel, it's shut down right now, and it's supposed to be incredible after it's reopened. And then Oak Tree National, but Oak Tree National is just so hard. It is so difficult, and you can hit good shots. We saw you hit a decent shot, and you can get into a spot where you just can't make a putt. You just can't get close to a pin, and then all of a sudden you hit a great shot, and you've got a 60-footer, that you're trying to 2-putt. It's a difficult course, but I think it's phenomenal. It's probably firmly in my top 20 that I've ever played. I haven't sat down and ranked them, but it's number 3 for me in the state of Oklahoma, and I could definitely argue that as far as courses that you can get access to pretty quickly, it's pretty high up there.
Yeah, I had a great time. I had never played it before as a kind of weekend warrior golfer here. It was stinking hard. It's long and narrow, so if you don't hit a good tee shot, you're just punished. So,
well, what Pete Dye said is that life isn't fair, so golf doesn't need to be fair. That's kind of his motto in creating a golf course. Put in perspective for our listeners, we had 4 single-digit handicappers playing a 4-man scramble, and we were not playing the back tees; we were playing the middle tees. And we shot 12 under. If you put the 4 of us on just about any other golf course, we're going to be stinking close to 18 under almost every time in a 4-man scramble. Like Anthony said, there were just times where you'd hit good shots and just making a putt was almost impossible. There's some 15-foot putts there that are really difficult.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that shot that Rob hit on, 14, I think it was, that he goes up that big hill behind the hill. We're in the rough, which if we're in the fairway, it probably checks a little better and is a tap in birdie. But he hits that shot, and those greens are just so firm and hard that he rolls up that hill and he stays up there. And so you've got that little putt that's 25 feet, and you have to literally hit it 2 inches. And if you don't catch the hole, it's going to
Blaze
I
on
thought you were
by.
going to
So
say that shot that Rob hit, and then he swore a bunch like afterward. So
can you be?
that's
You
what I
gotta
thought
be.
you were going to say.
Yeah, you gotta be more specific. Yeah. Luckily on that downhill 25-footer, I showed off the hands of an angel.
Yeah.
So, but I think we all gave that one a good look.
Well, I mean, you literally had to hit it, what, 2 inches?
Oh yeah, it was like
it's
kind of playing, Plinko almost on Price is Right. You just kind of you pick a slot, you get it started, and you just hope for the best.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, you were a rater for Golf Digest for quite a few years. I mean, just give us your professional look at Oak Tree National for somebody that's thinking of coming to Oklahoma to play it. Is it worth a trip?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Definitely challenging. I think the setup that day, the toughest part wasn't just that if you flew it to the pin, it would kind of run through on you, regardless of how well you can press the shot. But what made it really hard was if you tried to hit short and hop up, it would stop. So I kind of like to see the approach areas. If the greens are going to be firm, I want to see the approaches be firm too, because then you can kind of bounce it up if you need to. So that would be one critique as far as a lot of these courses, and plus it was early August, so a lot of the clubs are trying to water to save the grass, so that's understandable. No, I thought it was a classic Pete Dye course, good test. We probably could have played it from one set of tees back maybe and had a little bit more of a test, but it was plenty from wherever we played it from. Good mix of long and short par fours. I mean, a lot of times what you're looking at when you're rating a course, you want to see a mix of par fives that give you a good chance, risk reward to kind of go for it, or several options if you want to lay up. You want to see a good mix of long, stout par fours, but with some short, diabolical, pun intended, Pete Dye par fours, which it had. And sometimes those little short ones, they're the ones where you walk away with a 5 or 6 and are shaking your head thinking, how the hell did that happen? I had a lob wedge in my hand. So it had a good mix there. And I thought all the par threes were different. You want to see holes playing in different directions. They do at Oak Tree National. That way you get wind in your face, downwind, both sides. No, it's just, there's a reason why it's been ranked in the top 100 in the US for at least 20 years, I'm guessing. And, when you think about it, there are 17,000 golf courses in the United States. So if you're in the top 125, you're in the top 1% of all the golf courses that exist. And so you're really starting to split hairs when you're comparing courses within that top 1%. But I thought it was really good, and I enjoyed it, and I definitely think it's worth the trip.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason I believe that 16 tour pros are members at Oak Tree National because it tests them week in and week out. I think it's got an 80 course rating. I mean, obviously, these guys want to be tested in their practice rounds before they go out on tour. And to me, that's what really stood out, was just the pure difficulty.
I'd say this, that I would put it in the top 5 or 10 toughest courses that I've played. Right up there with Oakmont, Carnoustie, Ohio State Scarlet. There's Pine Valley. I mean, that's a test, especially the further you play it back. Trying to get at some of those pins with a longer iron would be a nightmare.
Well, I'll have to report back.
Well, again,
you guys on that.
Oh,
well,
go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
I'm taking a client out Thursday to play. So having not ever played it, I'm going to end up playing it twice here in a couple of months. So I'm taking some of our state's firefighters out on Thursday to play. So I'll have to report back how high in the 90s I ended up shooting when I have to keep my own score. So I don't get Matt's long drives or Rob's silky smooth, like wedge shots in. So
hands of an angel. He always reminds everybody he has hands of an angel. So.
Well, I think, speaking of silky smooth, I mean, you two are so well dressed today, but in very different ways. I mean, I'm sitting here in Long Island. I played National Golf Links of America yesterday afternoon. One of the best experiences I've had. But just so I'm here in a hoodie and a hat and an Airbnb. But Anthony here in a suit and tie, he looks like he's about to take my money.
He's ready.
Jason
My mattress tied.
Jason looks like he's about to go to a nightclub and steal your wife. I mean, Matt and I are just, our typical Monday uniforms. Mondays are my Zoom and conference call days from like 9 to 5. So I kind of load up my Mondays so that I can take my Fridays to play golf. Don't feel sorry for me.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the guy in the suit and tie that has to go to court this morning is the one who's broke. One of us is doing this all wrong. It's not you.
Well, there's a great reason for doing all your meetings on Monday because the country club's closed
Exactly.
anyway. So this is the day to do it. But so let's get in. Let's just again set the scene. We played 18-hole charity scramble. We actually came in second place, which I found hard to believe. But somebody shot 13 under. We shot 12 under. We'll just leave it at that. Anyway, we also did this nine-hole Republicans versus Democrat match, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But it was actually pretty.
It was 10 under.
Uninspiring. It was uninspiring. Let's put it that way. But I'm going to first play a clip for us of we'd had some great political discussions on the course, and that's going to be kind of the thrust of what we talk about. I'm going to play a clip for us here of talking about we're making predictions. This was actually the day before Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz to be her running mate. We had some predictions about who was going to be the vice presidential nominee with Kamala Harris. Here's the clip.
My question for my Democratic friends here, first of all, who do you think is going to be Shapiro, right?
As the vice president? I think it'll be Shapiro or Kelly. I think both will play well in Pennsylvania. So I think she gets the most out of Shapiro. He's got a 63% job approval as governor of Pennsylvania. Young, moderate.
He's not nearly as liberal as a lot of the other choices.
I think the other best pick would be Kelly out of Arizona, because I still think he'd play well in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a naval captain, astronaut, combat veteran, moderate.
I don't disagree, but I think it has to be Shapiro because the East Coast votes earlier. And you can't start out the night losing Pennsylvania and then you lose momentum out west.
I don't think there's any way Pennsylvania will be called.
Shapiro is fiery and feisty, and I think that's what she needs. I think she needs someone that's going to go out there and get a little attention and pull away from her son.
He's not crazy either.
So statistically, here's the Dems, and I'll admit this: the Dems screw it up all the time because they'll actively lean a little too far to the progressives, and same day voters are more moderate.
Yeah. Okay, gentlemen. So neither of you predicted that Tim Walz would be the vice presidential pick by Harris. You were both very bullish on Harris about her campaign. Both talking about how Shapiro or Kelly was who you guys were thinking was going to be the pick. So tell us, as Democrats, are you happy with the Walz pick? Do you think he's performing well on the ticket? And where do you give us just a kind of a general state of the race in your opinion at this point in mid-September?
Yeah, so I clearly didn't think it was going to be Walz. I thought it would be Shapiro. I thought what the campaign really needed was that bulldog in the race. They needed that, kind of strong, extra masculine voice. I mean, you've gone from President Biden, who had looked at best kind of weak on the stump. And, I thought that what they needed was just a little bit more of that vigor. And, clearly Pennsylvania, Shapiro, you would think would help bring a state like Pennsylvania. Walz was such an interesting pick. He was kind of like the outside guy, the, happy-go-lucky, kind of, fun older dad, if you will. In hindsight, talking to a bunch of folks that, were doing polling on it, that were looking at, who the Democrats should pick, they picked Walz for female voters. It has become clear that what they were looking for was a not as masculine guy, but just someone that kind of universally women voters were like, I like that guy. He's nice, he's kind. I feel like that he's looking out for my interests. And if you think about Kamala Harris, top of the ticket, looking for someone on that ticket to kind of balance out but not take away from her. I think that makes a lot more sense now why Walz was picked. He is the guy that can roll out and give the goofy one-liners and be very supportive of top of the ticket, female, and other females believe it. Instead of having, maybe a Shapiro type that comes out, gives his speech, and everyone's like, yeah, I really like that guy, and kind of forget about top of ticket. So I think that they were looking for that balance, and that made the most sense to them. As far as like how it's going, I think he's rolled out really well. I mean, he's played the all shucks card, the Tim Walz camo hats. I went to the DNC here recently, and it was Walz mania. People love the guy, love the pick. Thought he did a good job in his, Wednesday night speech. I thought she nailed it on Thursday night. She checked all the boxes that I thought she needed to. So I still think there's a lot of excitement and momentum going right now. I'm still trying to determine if it's because it's not Biden or if it's because it's really this like swell of like super interest in Harris Walz. So
I'd like to jump in just for a second, only because I know Tim Walz very well. He came on strong down the stretch, and I think his media appearances that last week really were what stuck out to Kamala in making the selection. I got to meet Tim Walz in 2006 when he was elected to Congress. I was running the new member orientation program, as you know, Matt, through House Admin. And he was one of the freshmen that I helped get his office set up and work with him and his wife and his chief of staff coming in. The impression you get of him on TV is who he is. He is an aw shucks nice guy, kind of a nerdy dad in a good way, like that dad or teacher or coach that, tells dad jokes. Super nice guy, as genuine as you could be, and really a serious legislator, the kind of guy that, most people, this has been said, but it's about him, but it's true. A lot of congressmen will show up at the hearing right before it's their time to ask questions and the cameras are on, and then leave right after. But he would show up at the Veterans Affairs Committee early, talk to the witnesses, stay there the whole time, not ask the same questions that everybody else asked, stay afterwards and thank them and get their contact info and stay in touch with them. So this is a guy that like really took the job seriously. He's not a fancy, East Coast slick talking guy. But I think that's what his appeal is. And he, I think that, his fave, unfave right now, talking in political speak, is a net +9. JD Vance is a -12. Now, look, nobody votes for vice president, right? Nobody goes to the booth to vote for vice president. So JD Vance will not be the reason that Donald Trump loses, and vice versa with Tim Walz, if Kamala loses. But I think that he helps. He's a net positive in a race that is razor thin. So I thought she'd go with Shapiro, because typically the vice president from that state would add about a point, maybe a point and a half, which in Pennsylvania would be very important. They may get that just by virtue of him being a Democratic governor. I still think Walz was actually the better pick in hindsight. When I saw Shapiro come out and speak the day they announced Walz, he's kind of slick and politician-y, and he gives off that vibe of like a managing partner at a Philadelphia law firm. And, Tim Walz, I think, even though Minnesota is not a swing state, I think I think he still plays well in the swing states because everybody has a friend with a dad like Tim Walz. Everybody had a coach or a teacher like Tim Walz. So, some of the criticisms of him are fair. He is definitely left of center. I think, but I think it was a strong pick. So that's my personal take.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Rob, about at the end of the day, nobody's voting for the vice presidential pick. And I think that the key when you're making that pick is to do no harm. And I think that she did no harm with Walz. I mean, I think he's kind of, at the end of the day, he's going to be a non-factor in the race. It's going to come down between Kamala and Donald Trump. It's a head-to-head matchup between the two of them. We saw last week their first debate, maybe the last debate that we're going to see from the two of them. And I want to go ahead and play a clip of Rob talking about a high school classmate of his that was arrested on January 6th. Let's play that clip, and then we're going to talk more about the presidential race.
The kid on my high school golf team, nuts. It's just nuts. Derek Jankart. Go ahead and use his name. It's fine. He, piece of shit. So he got arrested on January 6th, posting on Facebook from the speaker's office, rummaging through her stuff. And he does nine months in the pokey. And so a lot of my friends from high school, not long after the whole deal, were saying, oh, that wasn't MAGA, that was Antifa out there. So I wrote back, I didn't know Derek Jankart was Antifa. And this kid, like, to this day, thinks he was a patriot. And he said, I was an Air Force veteran, da-da-da-da. And the judge said, because you were an Air Force veteran, you should know better.
Yeah.
That was the whole deal on that.
Wow.
Okay, so January 6th was obviously something that came up in this most recent debate between Harris and Trump. She was constantly kind of needling at Trump, trying to get him off message, and I think that Trump took the bait multiple times. I mean, if I'm Donald Trump and I'm being asked about January 6th or anything, or about my court cases or any of that, instead of the grievance politics, I think that you got to stand up and say, the Democrats want to continue to look in the past. They want to play smoke and mirrors and hide the fact that when I was president, we had African-American unemployment rate was the lowest in history. When I was president, the border was secure. When I was president, we were energy independent. Start hitting these positive messages. It just doesn't seem like President Trump is capable, Anthony, of staying on that message, which I believe is a winning message. Run on your record and deflect about January 6th instead of trying to defend it. Run on your record, and let's not talk about the stolen election in 2020. Instead, just focus on what you did well from 2017 to 2020. And play on those issues where you have an advantage on the economy and the border and on energy. What's your thoughts about where the race is right now?
Well, I think you're exactly right. I was really disappointed that he took that bait. I thought the debate started off really well, actually, for both sides. I thought the first question or so, they were moving along pretty well. But then I thought she scored some major points, and he did a poor job of staying on topic and letting her direct him where she wanted him to go instead of where he needs to go to get the votes he needs to get. I thought after the debate, one of the best things I heard was Senator Markwayne Mullin going on national television and saying, listen, we can talk about, both sides have had these same issues. You talk about the hanging Chad and Democrats saying that the election was stolen and let's have a recount and all this stuff, and so I think that there are a few different ways he could have gone that would have done a better job than what he did. But overall, I do think she kind of led him down a rabbit hole and made points with the people that are going to matter, because we talked about it. We talked about it at the golf course. We talked about it several times since then. We've got 100,000, 200,000 people in a couple different states that are going to really matter on this, and they want to be reminded of how great things were. They don't want to be going back to this. January 6th is obviously a losing point for him.
Yeah, if we're relitigating January 6th, if we're relitigating the election of 2020, we're losing. If we're talking about issues that affect people's wallets, if we're talking about issues that affect people's public safety, I believe that's when we're winning. Now, this all being said, I will admit, ABC did a terrible job with this debate. Our Democratic friends here may disagree, but it was clearly over the top. I don't believe that it was incredibly fair for the president that, he was being fact-checked like crazy, not always even correctly. She was given a free pass, and if this is true that, ABC gave her the questions and not Trump, that's a big scandal that needs talked about. But regardless of all that, if you're Trump, you should expect that it's going to be an unfair debate. And I still think you can overcome it by staying on message and staying disciplined. And that's where I get frustrated sometimes as somebody that's voting for President Trump and wants him to win. It's his inability sometimes to just stay on message on a winning path.
I was looking at the sworn affidavit last night from the whistleblower saying that they coordinated with her. She had some things that were not allowed to be talked about. They had the questions, and that they fact checked Trump 5 times and didn't fact check her at all. Which again, you're right. It's supposed to be expected. But we were talking about my wife and I. You go back to growing up, and some of those reporters were the most trusted person in the household. We went to Dan Brokaw to get our news because we trusted him. He was going to tell us the truth. And so seeing these media outlets, take sides or will play one side against the other is really frustrating.
I love you guys, but I'm going to cut in here because you're so foolish. I mean, first of all, whenever, I mean,
here we go.
Whichever side, and my side has done this in the past too. Whenever you're bitching about the moderators, you lost the debate. I mean, let's get serious here. And also on the fact checking, when you say, or your candidate says, that Haitians are eating cats and dogs, they're eating the pets in Springfield, Ohio, which, by the way, I know Springfield, Ohio. This is the most exciting thing to happen in Springfield, Ohio in a long time. They may take a tourism hit, but God bless them. So when you say something like that and the moderator says, that's not true, that's basic fact checking, spot fact checking. When the president says repeatedly, I won the election last time, and you say, actually, you did not, that is not exactly, it's not like he's up there.
If I have to hear one more time that Trump called these racist people in Charlottesville good people, I'm going to lose my mind. It's been debunked how many times yet? It just continues to come up over and over again.
Good bait and switch. He certainly didn't call them bad people. They're Nazis. I never thought I'd live long enough to where we were debating whether Nazis were good people or bad people. Now,
this was the whole reason Joe Biden ran for president. He said, this is the number one. I only ran for president because Trump called these people good people.
He would not condemn them. I mean, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, he will not condemn them. And you know why? Because they like him. Donald Trump will never say anything bad about people that like him. Now, if you don't like him, you get a I hate Taylor Swift tweet. Now, the real story, and then you talk about Kamala getting the questions in advance, like this is an ACT test. They're the easiest questions on earth. Neither of them were asked.
She can't answer them, Rob. They are the easiest questions on earth, and she can't answer them.
She did. Anthony, if they gave Donald
for 3 years, and I can do a better job answering questions in front of the media than she can. It's
Anthony, if they gave Donald Trump the answers to the questions in advance, do you think he'd stick to them? Oh, hell no.
He would probably cheat and off cap.
He did a fantastic job in that debate. He did a terrible job in that debate. The best thing I've heard about it, when she was baiting him with the crowds leaving early and the crowd sizes and his personal wealth not being that big and inheriting money and going bankrupt 6 times. She was like Bugs Bunny drawing a fake tunnel on a wall, and he kept running head first right into that tunnel. So I don't care if you give every answer to every question. He can't.
But my question is, Rob, should the debate be unbiased and fair?
I thought it was unbiased and fair. The guy's up there just blatantly.
If one side gets the questions and the other side doesn't.
There's no proof that she got the questions in advance, and it was just like the Democrats in 2004 saying that George Bush had an earpiece in. If George Bush had an earpiece in, there was a tape delay because the answers he were giving were terrible. So the bottom line is this is all nonsense. It's designed to deflect. When Joe Biden had a terrible debate in June, go back to what did I say? It's time for him to step aside. That was terrible. There was no defending it. And Donald Trump's performance, he was president of the United States for 4 years. He's been running for president for 9 years. He should be able to answer whatever questions are asked of him. They both gave their responses. His were ridiculous. Like, Matt's right. It all comes down to whatever question they ask you, his response should be, your grocery bill is more than it was 4 years ago. Gasoline costs more today than it did 4 years ago. Kamala Harris has had a chance to fix it, and she hasn't. Yeah. How hard is that?
But it's the same. Look, I'll cede this. Look, it's the same frustration I had in 2020. I voted for Trump in 2016. I voted for him in 2020. I'm voting for him in
So
2024.
it's all your fault.
However,
It's all your fault.
that doesn't mean that I'm not frustrated. The political consultant inside of me is frustrated that you have this opportunity to stay on message, and you'd rather play the grievance tour, and it does bother me because ultimately it could cost us the election. Which let's talk about.
Well,
If the
don't
election were
answer
today,
the
who do you
question.
think wins the election if it is today? I mean, where do you see the state of the race? Jason, let's go to you. Where do you see it if the election was today? Who's in the White House in January?
Honestly, I still think it's 50-50 right now. I mean, it really is. We talked about it on the golf course. It's really down to about 5 states, and honestly, it's probably down to about 5 to 7 counties in those 5 states. So I don't think anybody's getting new voters out. So I mean,
I'd even take it a step further. I think it's down to 5 or 6 neighborhoods
Yeah.
in those counties. I mean, I really do. It's going to be college-educated, formerly Republican precincts. Are they going to vote Republican or Democrat? They are the true swing voters.
Listening to
I
Rob, kind of come back at you guys a little bit on the debate, it makes me laugh a little bit, just because that's Rob's personality, and I'm here for it. But the debate for me, nope, it wasn't meant to get new voters. It was meant to try and turn out your base. Like this election, if it were tomorrow, is all about base turnout. So 2020, what was it, 80 million or so voters came out for the blue side and 76 million or so came out for the red side. So that's kind of the base they're looking at right now. They need those same people to come out. If one group stays home, and then it's foregone conclusion. So I will say, after this debate may have been the best that I've seen the internet in a while. It's the fun internet that came out after the debate. The type of internet that I grew up with that was supposed to like be lighthearted and make you laugh, not like the mean, like cringe-worthy stuff that I feel like is on there mostly now. But if you haven't seen the video of the "I eat the dogs, I eat the cats," I think I've seen that 100 times.
It's
and I laugh
good.
every
It's good.
time. So yeah, I mean, at least the debate got us some good memes and some wholesome internet content.
All right, so you got it at 50-50.
You-
Anthony, where do you have the race?
I
If
mean,
you had to handicap it.
It's a nail biter. I wouldn't bet any of my own money on it. If you gave me, a couple $1,000s of Rob's money, I'd probably put it on Trump at the moment. But it's so close. I mean, it's a coin flip.
I think I know I'm not a guest, but I'll go ahead and chime in because it's what I do. I think with 50 days to go, I would say Trump is a small favorite, only because he's Teflon. Literally nothing can come out about him over the next 50 days that can make him go down. She might have a slight narrow edge right at the moment, but because she's lesser known, even though she's been a vice president and a public figure for a long time, any bad news can cause a little dip with her. So she's got to run like the underdog. I'm not saying that Trump's going to win, but I think she is the underdog for the last 50 days. And it's going to come down to those 5 neighborhoods, as you said, in those states, and who can turn out their vote. The risk for her and why Democrats should not be overconfident is precisely that one bad news story at the wrong time does not hurt him, but it does hurt her.
Are you? Let me,
So,
really
Jason,
quick. To this point, I'm not sure Democrats have figured out yet how to poll Trump. I mean, I've seen a number of stories about how going in that 2020 race where they had Biden up, especially like Wisconsin, up 10 points, he wins by like 0.03. I think for me, why I still think it's 50-50 is those 5 counties, those 5 neighborhoods. I'm still not sure that they know how to poll Trump. And so you could be pushing out your message, look like it's working, look like you're getting your turnout, and then Trump, outperform by 4 or 5 points. And that's the difference. And if Democrats don't figure out where that bias is and what those questions are, then I still think they're probably, like as Rob would say, the underdog.
And I think this is where I think Rob is right about Trump is not he's Teflon. The flip side of that is he doesn't have a lot of room to grow either because he is so well defined. And my big fear as a Republican who wants Trump to win is the Republican college-educated white voter in suburban and urban America. So I'm talking about suburban, urban Milwaukee, suburban and urban Philadelphia. These are people that historically have been registered Republican. They are George W. Bush voters. They were Mitt Romney voters. Are they going to vote for Trump? And right now, you definitely see a dip with those voters, and that concerns me. You know, I mean, if they either stay home or vote for Kamala, that's what's going to flip this election, in my opinion. And right now, I just don't know that Trump is doing much to reach out to them, because oftentimes they're not as affected by the economic issues as somebody making $50,000 or $60,000 a year.
My biggest concern is, and I think you're right about that, you know, if gas goes up 20 cents a gallon, I don't think anybody on this phone really feels it the same way that somebody making 40 grand a year or 20 grand a year feels it. My big fear as a Democrat is the unknown at this point. I like the trajectory we're on. I think we're on track to win this. But I'm worried about a Middle Eastern upsetting moment, whether it's the Houthi rebels or Iran or Russia escalating something, Israel escalating something before the election. Not that they want Trump to win or they want Kamala to lose or any of that. They want this thing to be in question. They want all of us to be fighting. It's a win for Russia and China and North Korea and all of the Iran for this thing to be in question. They want that. And I want to have a healthy, clean election that allows us to move forward. I know we're always going to fight and have arguments, but we can't have a repeat of what happened last time. And I'm worried about, you know, what is the unexpected. I think both campaigns know exactly what they're going to do over the next 50 days to turn out their vote. If I'm Kamala, I'm only worried about the unexpected thing that pops up.
I would agree that her ceiling is much higher than his. I think that he's got a pretty hard ceiling, and to Matt's point, he's got to get near 100% of that group to turn out to have a shot.
All right, so we've handled where we disagree on the presidential election. Let's move the discussion to areas where we agree. We had some great discussions on the golf course. I'm going to play clips for us here about where we agree, about primaries and how they affect elections. We'll show you a clip as well about the Rodel program and another clip about the Clinton presidency. Let's go ahead and roll those clips.
You know, 3.5 hour drive from Prairie Dunes last night. There's a lot that we agree on, right? I mean, but the system is set up in such a way that doesn't always work because you have to win a primary.
100%.
And I mean, you're a perfect example of somebody that was crucified for working with Republicans when it made sense to work with Republicans.
If in Oklahoma, if Republicans would have been able to vote like a top 2 system, I would have never lost.
Right, no
ever.
question.
Because I still had a plenty
if
enough.
I lived in your district, I was voting for you.
100%.
Every time, even though we disagree on some things, but we're together probably 60%.
House District 88, a Republican hadn't been on the ballot for 16 years. Yeah. So Republicans literally had no say because they couldn't vote in the primary. So they had no say for 16 years.
June 18th decided who runs our state,
right.
and 1/5 of just Republicans showed up to vote. I don't think that's a good system. I'm sorry. More people need to have a say in the process, period.
The Rodel program is 12 Republicans, 12 Democrats, and that's one class. So there's 24 of them each year, and they get together, and I'm a Rodel, so I know all of it, but you read like Martin Luther King's letters in Birmingham, you read Plato and Aristotle and all this stuff, and you get together 3 different times over a period of a year, and you have all these like philosophical discussions, and then you also talk about trying to like solve problems in a bipartisan way.
All right, 1 hole to go.
That shows you how crazy our party is that they gave Clinton a speaking spot, both of them, at the DNC, and the progressives are mad about it because they're like, "Why are you letting them? They're the old part."
Bill
of the
Clinton was a
party."
good president. He was a
And I was
great.
just
His
like, "Are you
foreign policy
kidding me?"
might be one of the best.
Hey, Bill
Good
Clinton.
president.
I will give you this for
That's
Bill Clinton.
most fiscally
When the
conservative
Republican
president we've had in our
Congress
lifetime.
came in,
Yeah.
Followed by Bush
he knew
Senior.
how to read the tea leaves and get
Yeah.
and get
I
things
love the
done.
book.
right.
Yeah,
And Reagan, I mean, all three of those in a row were great.
yeah.
What are we? We're one.
All right, gentlemen, those clips are interesting. Let's get into a couple follow-up questions on that. In our current system of electoral politics, 90% of our elected officials at the state and the federal level, they are ensured victories by simply winning a primary. Jason, I want to go to you first because you're a perfect example of this. Jason, you were representing your district. I don't believe there's been a Republican even on the ballot in your district since like 2002. I mean, I might be exaggerating that, but it's been forever. You served 6 years, and you lost to somebody that came at you hardcore from the left. You know, are these primary systems where the fringe of the party electing the leader, is that good for our democratic republic or bad? Should there be some changes in how we do primaries around the country?
It's 100% bad for the districts, for states, for the country. How we fix it is up to a lot of debate. I will say my good friend in the legislature, Mike Osborne, may have been the last Republican that ran House District 88.
And he had no business running. My business partner found Holland said, "Are you crazy? You can't win that district." And that was 22 years ago.
Mike and I always had a really great laugh about that because he was like, "Oh man, I got whipped." But Mike and I's politics were probably a lot closer than the person that ran against me to my left. And I just felt bad for the district because, I, for 6 years, worked hard to try and build relationships and see policy through. But a lot of what voters want is someone to just hold a bullhorn, stand on the steps of the Capitol and, scream hate. And it gets them all, worked up. It's kind of to the point of my comment earlier about social media being mostly just hateful speech right now instead of the good fun stuff. But yeah, no, I'm a huge advocate for a top two system. I truly meant it when I said when I was elected that I was elected to represent everyone in House District 88, whether they were Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, whether they were black, white, Native American, Indian, whether they were Republican, Democrat. Like, it didn't matter to me. My job was to represent everyone, at least hear everyone out. And I don't even think we do that anymore. I mean, it's kind of like, if you're not on my team, don't talk to me. And I just think that's a sad state for our country right now. So I would love to see a top two system in Oklahoma where just a primary and a general, everyone's in the primary, vote for whoever you want. The top two people go to the general. In states like Oklahoma, that general, a lot of those would be two Republicans. Or
in your district, it would be two Democrats.
It would have been.
And Republicans could have a say in
so
electing.
Then everyone gets a say. And what I think you find is that you get a lot less of these like extremes because you wouldn't be incentivizing, speaking to the 27% in a primary that's going to get you through, to a runoff that then in the general people feel like they have no real choice because, well, I'm Republican, so I have to vote Republican, or, well, I'm Democrat, so I have to vote Democratic. I think you eliminate some of that by doing a top two system. So I'd be a huge advocate for that. I think our state should go that way. But that's up to our voters. I mean, I'd love to see it as a state question.
27% is awfully generous too. I mean, in our last primary, it was 19% statewide turnout. 19%. Yeah. That's just of registered Republicans because our Republican primaries in the state are closed to independents. So if you're not a registered Republican, you can't show up. So that's a small percentage of people to begin with, just registered Republicans, and only 19% of them showed up. We had districts in the Tulsa area that were 14% turnout. I mean, to me, that's not a good system for electing representatives that are going to do major policy that affects your everyday life in this state.
Agreed.
Not to mention who gets elected to Congress and the U.S. Senate.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. What do you think about that?
Anthony, as somebody that's in the legislature, I mean, how do you view this? And you've had some colleagues that have lost Republican primaries that is shocking. People in leadership, people that are doing a great job. So,
well, I honestly think And this is where my personal opinion and that of my constituents probably varies a little bit, because I know a lot of I'm in an extremely rural area in western Oklahoma. I represent 2,700 plus square miles for 39,000 people. I mean, Rob, that's the size of the state of Delaware. And I've got 39,000 people. So, um, it's very remote, very rural, very, very conservative. I mean, I think Trump won Roger Mills County like 88% in 2020, and will probably get higher this year somehow. So, um, but personally, I think that the way you protect against the far edges of both parties, the far left and the far right, is a jungle primary system where the top two go on, because, like you said, Matt, you're going to have two Republicans in this seat out here. You're going to have, and quite frankly, in all of rural Oklahoma and rural America, you're going to have two Republicans. And so then when you get to that general election, who's going to win? Well, it's not going to be the extreme candidate. It's going to be the more moderate candidate, or just the more common sense candidate. And so I think that you look at those seats that we lost in Oklahoma. You don't lose those seats in that system. Kevin Wallace never loses. Dean Davis never loses. Some of those things. And so, unfortunately, it's a poor talking point for a lot of people that worry about getting reelected. Now, I don't care because at the end of the day, I lose money every day I'm up there. I mean, there's a reason that JD's not running for his seat again when it's open. It's because he got out and he's doing way better now, right? And so, but at the end of the day, you've got too many people around the state that are worried about that next election and that or that climbing the ladder to the even higher office. And so,
what's hilarious is the far right will paint this picture of sitting office holders are up there in the quote unquote swamp, enriching themselves, and it's like. I can look at a guy like Kevin Wallace who lost his election, and it's one of the most heartbreaking losses I've ever been a part of as his consultant. But it's just brutal. Like, I mean, you had people just thinking that this guy is a selfish pig when the reality is Kevin Wallace was a selfless leader. Kevin Wallace could have made so much more money over the last decade in private business. He's a very successful private businessman. He put that on hold to serve the public, to lead the Appropriations and Budget Committee at a very high level, put the state in unbelievable financial footing. And even Democrats that disagree with him on certain things can say, the man was pretty smart at running the budget for our state, and our state is way better off financially because Kevin Wallace was there. And we can't get that message across because he's just not conservative enough. He's part of the establishment. And it just gets this... It's almost impossible to defend against this boogeyman called the swamp.
And Rob's gonna love hearing me go off on some of our own party here. I mean, like, he's just licking his lips. Look at him; he's excited. But the thing, I'm a property attorney, Matt, and so the thing that wore me out about that race was you've got people on the far right saying, "I want to do what I want in my land," and the whole argument was, "But you can't do what you want on your land." That's not conservative. That's populist. And we've got to get away from this populist.
It's borderline anarchy. I would go a step further. We have people, and this is where the left and the right meet, in my opinion. The fringes of our party and the fringes of the Democratic Party, I believe, kind of meet in certain ways where it's we don't want any government unless it's for us, unless it benefits us. And I think that's where it's got to stop.
I mean, there's no shortage of boobs and dum-dums in my party, too. I mean, we've got our fair share of nincompoops. There's no doubt about it. And the problem with the system today is that there's more of an incentive to make the other person look bad than to make yourself look good. I mean, the worst thing I could do for Anthony in his reelection would be to endorse him and say that he's a reasonable guy that, we hung out for a day. And there's no doubt in my mind that on a majority of issues, we could work out some sort of an agreement to move forward. Now, there would be obvious impasses where, we have different values or different priorities. Not that one set's right or wrong, but there would be certain things where we, might say, hey, we'll kick this one to another day, but we can agree on roads and bridges, or we can agree on education, on whatever the issue might be. But when you have closed primaries, gerrymandered districts, and 19% of the voters who tend to be either the most conservative or the most liberal are picking the nominee, then obviously you respond to the people who vote. And if you get outside of that wiggle room, that there is no wiggle room, you get outside of that little box, then you're in trouble of losing to somebody not on your left, but on your right, and vice versa for Democrats. And so we've now reached the point where the term reasonable and statesman and bipartisan and effective are slurs. And it's not new. I mean, George H.W. Bush was, in my mind, a phenomenal president. In my mind, a better president than Reagan. By no stretch of the imagination, a better politician. But the guy was a patriot, reasonable, cut deals. It cost him his job. But I think George H.W. Bush left the country better than he found it. He couldn't win a primary today. Bill Clinton would have a hard time winning a primary today. I put Clinton and Reagan in a special basket just because they're so charismatic and so talented that maybe they could squeak through. But we've got to get back
But
to doing the right thing.
Reagan would be a rhino because he, 80% of, something was a good deal for him. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's all or nothing. And so the populist movement, I mean, he's a rhino. He could, he's a sellout. He works with the other side, and that's just something you can't do. I mean, Dunnington got more bills across than any Democrat in his 6 years by far. And his district's like, nah, don't care about that. We'd rather have no voice at all, which they did.
Right.
They had no voice for 4 years.
Well, we've spent a lot of time on the pessimistic side of our politics right now, but I mean, it's not a reason for people to give up and not engage. I'm going to go ahead and play a clip, though, right now of Jason and I talking about what it takes to run a successful campaign.
Sure. There's so much in politics that's outside of your control. Yeah. And it's not you need to be aware of it and see if you can use it to your advantage in some capacity. But for the most part, most of it's just noise and distracts you from the real goal, which is knocking more doors, raising more money, getting your message to the right voters more
Just what we said earlier, I say it's a lot like golf. It's confidence.
Yeah, confidence.
You have confidence.
Taking aim at where you need to go and hitting it with conviction.
If you can go out and be on an issue where is the position that you're most comfortable with and you just own it,
right,
people will follow you on it.
That's right.
But when you're all wishy-washy, God, I tell new members all the time, I'm like, the worst thing you can do is change your mind on the floor.
Yeah.
Just
no question.
Already know how you're voting.
And it is a lot like golf because, say you get a shot like this and you're unsure about the club, you don't know what to hit.
You go pick a different club.
And you hit it right in the water.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen, so many of our listeners might actually want to get involved in politics, despite how pessimistic of a picture we just painted for everybody. People that might even want to run for office. And everybody in this podcast has had success in electoral politics in different capacities. So let's go through what are some tangible pieces of advice that you can offer to those who are listening to our podcast that may want to step out, try to make a difference in their community, state, or nation, and run for public office?
I'd just say it's like serving on a board of a charity that you really believe in. It's the perfect act of public service. So, if you find yourself, kind of hungering for more, to have a voice in something, to help change the course of, what policy looks like in your specific area, go volunteer for a campaign. Go spend a Saturday knocking doors with a candidate that you believe in, and go talk to real people. There's nothing better. I know everyone always talks bad about the retail politics, the day to day, but it was my favorite part. Each different person that would come and answer their door and the issues that they would have. I would have 5 things that I thought I was ready to talk about, and they would not talk about any of them. It would be something random, and half the people just are yearning to talk to somebody. I can't stress enough how the internet has changed the way we interact with one another, and how it's changed our politics, and how it's turned us into me instead of we. We're all looking for the most followers, the greatest microphone, the biggest ability to slam somebody else, instead of the greatest opportunity to listen to the most people. And most average voters just want someone to hear them out. And, there are a lot of people that I talked to that probably didn't believe in all my politics, but I talked to them 5 or 6 times at their door. And so they're like, yeah, I'll vote for that guy. But yeah, I mean, go volunteer for a campaign. Like, as much as I think that it's crazy in politics, it was one of the most unique jobs that I've ever had. And I would encourage anyone to do it. I've made some lifelong friendships, including the guy that's on the podcast with us. I'm actually going out to his neck of the woods next week to have dinner. And then he told me that he's going to be in my neck of the woods on the same night because I invited him to come with me. But I mean,
he's going to eat at one of the best restaurants in Oklahoma, overlooking sunset, where you can basically see California.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But the friendships you make, the camaraderie, the opportunity to really, like change the course of, of policy in the state. I mean, we were in the trenches on some stuff here in Oklahoma, budget deficit after budget deficit after budget deficit, and got everybody together. Passed the first tax increase in like 50 years and put ourselves financially in a place where we're actually capable of doing the things we need to protect our state. Mm-hmm. And I'll remember those things forever. So,
Anthony, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Jason said. I think for me, it's boots on the ground. Be involved locally. If you think that you may want to serve in whatever capacity, start serving now, whether it's the chamber, the Lions Club, the Rotary, the Kiwanis, the school foundation. Get involved, get plugged in, find your why, because that at the end of the day, that's what this was about. The reason I truly believe the reason that it was pretty natural for me to flow into this job was because when I moved back, to my hometown, where I've got 5 generations of family that are from this county. It's because we've been around, and all of them have served in some capacity. My mom taught for 33 and a half years. My granddad was involved in every possible civic organization he could be in because he just liked helping people and be authentic. Be true to you and find what really drives you, because what drives Jason. There may be some save the Springfield Dogs and Cats organization that he's involved, he's excited about, that I'm not, but find your reason and find your why. And for me, it's pretty easy because I go home to my why. I've got a 13, 11, and 7-year-old, like you mentioned earlier, that I want rural Oklahoma to be able to thrive and have the things that, I want them to be able to live here, but have the same opportunities as if they lived in downtown Oklahoma City like Jason. And our ways of life are very different, but they're both great. And so just find your reason for your drive and really lean into that. That's what
I love hearing this, because there's so much cynicism out there. And I always push back on folks that say, oh, it's broken, or oh, it's all corrupt. I meet more good people than bad people, even in Washington. A lot of folks that run and are trying to do the right thing, a lot of smart staff on both sides that are trying to do the right thing. It just sucks that the people that are out there looking for attention are the ones that get attention, and they cast a negative aspersion on everybody else. And I remember, I think this is probably a quote from Bill Clinton that we might all agree on, but he spoke at my college my junior year, also his alma mater. And he said that America was the greatest country on earth for 2 reasons. Americans believe that tomorrow will be better than today, and that each of us has a personal moral responsibility to make it so. And when you talk to the vast majority of people out there, whether they're a nurse, teacher, firefighter, they want their kids to have a better life than they had. They want their neighborhood to be clean and safe. They volunteer at their church or their PTA, or a volunteer firefighter or National Guard or whatever it is. But they serve even if they don't know what they're doing is service. And that spirit in this country, the biggest difference I see about America than most of the countries that we've traveled to, is that there's that hope that tomorrow will be better than today. And I think that leaders need to have that positive outlook Otherwise, we all just drown in the cynicism, and life turns into a Twitter comment thread that is just disgusting. And we gotta just ignore that shit and stay positive about what is right about the country, what's working in the neighborhoods in your district in Oklahoma, what's right about them, and try to take some positives and highlight the positives, because we're getting too negative, and I think a lot of it's self-inflicted wounds.
No question. And I think, Rob, you hit on the point. I mean, why did we start this podcast in the first place? Is we have the fundamental belief that there are more good people involved in politics than bad people. And while we have massive disagreements and we will have arguments, we don't have to hate each other. And our goal is to get around this country and play golf and interview as many people involved in politics as possible, so that people that are watching our podcast or listening to our podcast can see, hey, I disagree with that guy. I don't agree with him on taxes. I don't agree with him on foreign policy. I don't agree with him on social issues. But damn it, he's a nice guy. I wouldn't mind playing golf with that guy. I wouldn't mind having a beer with that guy. And I think if we have more of those kind of discussions, we're going to be better off. And so I want to close us out playing a clip of Anthony Moore telling us why he loves the podcast. So, Anthony, thank you for listening to our podcast.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
What do you like about it?
I just like it's all things that I know, right? I mean, politics, golf, it's a little bit of all of it. The best part is just the camaraderie. I mean, you guys talk about all the time, the R and the D. I mean, you can disagree and still get along.
Right. Yeah.
Anthony, thank you for that clip. And I think you hit the nail on the head on why we want to do this podcast in the first place. Jason, Anthony, thank you for joining us today. Any last words? Jason, you want to hit real quickly on the Rodel program? And that's one thing I wanted to get to today that we didn't. Just why is it a great program, and how can it foster more bipartisan cooperation in government?
Yeah, it was started by Congressman Mickey Edwards from Oklahoma, an outstanding program, started in 2005. And all it really is it brings 12 elected Republicans, 12 elected Democrats from all different levels, city council, mayors, state house of legislature, state senates, some lieutenant governors, brings them together. You go through some readings, you talk about, democracy, you talk about what's good about America and how you can work together to make it the best that it can possibly be. It tries to catch people young in their careers so that they'll grow in this fellowship. There's about 380 of us. When I say us, I got to do the program, so I feel very fortunate for that. But what you might be surprised to learn is Kamala Harris is a 2009 Rodel Fellow. She was in that class with Governor Shapiro. So that's where they first met each other, was Rodel. Some incredible Rodels from Oklahoma, including Mayor of Tulsa, G.T. Bynum, Mayor of Oklahoma City, David Holt. You've got, former speakers, former pro tems. I'm really not sure how I got in the program with all these incredible Republicans from Oklahoma that were in it. But just it's a unique program to bring us together. I think that's what you guys are doing on this podcast. Matt, you and Rob are incredible humans. You have different politics. You're a hell of a good time to play golf with. Looking forward to playing with you guys the next time, and appreciate you having.
We need to redo we didn't even mention we played this Republicans versus Democrats match. We were so ginned up for it, and it was 155 degrees. We were tired, we were cranky, and the golf was absolutely pathetic, and there's not a lot of great highlights. Maybe we'll post a few of them on social media. But Jason and Anthony, thank you for joining us. We need to do another 2v2 match next time Rob's in town. And if you're listening, thank you so much. Please subscribe. Please leave us a review. Give us a good rating. The more listeners that we get, the more we can invest in bringing you great content. Follow us at Golf and Politics on Instagram and Facebook, or Golf Politics Pod on X. Thanks so much for listening.